The annual Miller family barbecue was in full swing, the scent of grilled steaks mingling with the suffocating weight of familial disappointment. I sat at the corner table, intentionally distanced from the successful members of the clan, picking at my potato salad while my brother Marcus held court near the pool. So then I told the CEO, Marcus's voice carried across the perfectly manicured lawn of our parents' estate, either we acquire them now or watch our market share dissolve. He paused for effect, adjusting his Rolex. Closed the deal for $80 million next day. The assembled relatives murmured appreciatively. Marcus, vice president of acquisitions at Sterling International, was their golden child. At 35 he had everything our family valued. The corner office, the seven-figure salary, the mansion in the right zip code. I, on the other hand, was the cautionary tale. Sarah. My mother's voice cut through my thoughts as she approached, martini in hand. Darling, come join the conversation. Marcus was just explaining his latest triumph at Sterling. I heard, I said quietly, not bothering to move from my isolated perch. Congratulations, Marcus. He smirked, breaking away from his admirers to saunter over. Still running that tiny consulting firm, sis? What's it called again? Elite Solutions. He chuckled. Bit ambitious with the elite part, isn't it? If he only knew that Elite Solutions' modest office suite was just a front. That the real operation ran from the top 3 floors of the Blackwood Tower downtown, carefully hidden behind layers of shell companies and NDAs. We manage, I replied, thinking of the encrypted laptop in my car containing our client list, CEOs, tech billionaires, and yes, even Marcus's boss, Richard Sterling himself. Not as an Elite Solutions client, but as something far more interesting. You know, Marcus continued, sprawling in the chair across from me, Sterling's always looking for good people in our HR department. Entry-level, of course, but it would be a start. Better than... He waved his hand dismissively. Whatever it is you're doing. Our cousin Jennifer, herself a junior executive at a prestigious firm, joined us. Marcus is right, Sarah. You had such potential at business school. Remember when you turned down that offer from Goldman Sachs? Everyone thought you'd lost your mind. They didn't know that Goldman Sachs had approached Elite Solutions last year, offering to acquire us for $300 million. I'd turned them down. Our real value was worth 10 times that, but they'd never know it from our carefully maintained modest appearance. Speaking of business, Marcus leaned forward, lowering his voice conspiratorially. Something big's happening at Sterling. Richard's been acting strange lately, lots of closed-door meetings. Word is he's planning a major restructuring. I took a sip of water to hide my smile. Richard Sterling wasn't planning anything. He was following my firm's carefully crafted strategy to the letter. As of last week, Elite Solutions owned 31% of Sterling International through various proxy companies. Marcus had no idea he'd been effectively working for his little sister for the past 3 months. That must be unsettling, I offered, watching him preen. Please, he scoffed. I'm untouchable. Richard knows my value. In fact, he's probably planning to promote me to senior VP. About time, really. Our father joined us, his presence drawing more relatives like moths to a flame. Marcus was just telling me about the Anderson deal, he announced proudly. 80 million. That's my boy. The Anderson deal? I couldn't resist. Interesting timing. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? Nothing, I shrugged. Just that their stock dropped 15% last week. Unusual for such a solid acquisition. How would you know about? Marcus started but was interrupted by his phone buzzing. He glanced at it, frowned, then excused himself quickly. I knew what that message said. Richard Sterling had called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. The restructuring Marcus mentioned? It was happening, but not the way he thought. Sarah, my mother sighed, watching Marcus stride away importantly. I do wish you'd let your brother help you. This stubborn insistence on running your little business. It's not too late to join the corporate world properly. I thought about Elite Solutions' real office space. 50,000 square feet of prime real estate with a view of the city that would make Marcus's corner office look like a storage closet. About our true client list, carefully hidden behind code names and shell companies. About the fact that we didn't just consult for major corporations, we often owned controlling interests in them. Maybe you're right, Mom, I said mildly. Maybe it is time for a change. She brightened immediately. Really? Oh darling, that's wonderful. You know, Marcus could put in a word at Sterling. Actually, I smiled, reaching for my phone as a particular notification caught my eye. I was thinking of something a bit more substantial. The notification was from my CFO. Sterling International shares secured. Current ownership 51%. Proceeding with Monday's announcement as planned. Monday morning arrived with the kind of spectacular sunrise that seemed to herald significant changes. I sat in my real office on the 45th floor of the Blackwood Tower, watching Marcus arrive at Sterling International in his BMW through my panoramic windows. He had no idea that in exactly 47 minutes his world would implode. Ms. Miller. My executive assistant, Claire, appeared with a stack of folders. The board meeting at Sterling starts in 30 minutes. Richard just confirmed everything's in place. I nodded, thinking about Richard Sterling's face when I'd finally revealed myself as the power behind Elite Solutions 3 months ago. The mighty CEO had been shocked to learn that the tiny consulting firm he'd dismissed 2 years earlier now effectively controlled his company. How's the press release looking? I asked, opening my laptop to review the morning's schedule. Ready to go. Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and Bloomberg all have exclusives lined up. Claire hesitated. Your brother's name isn't mentioned specifically, but given his position, he'll be very publicly displaced, I finished. That's rather the point. My phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Weird vibe at the office today. Richard called an all-hands meeting, probably announcing my promotion. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened the secured folder containing Elite Solutions' true client list. Sterling International was just the tip of the iceberg. We owned controlling interests in 17 Fortune 500 companies, all acquired quietly through a labyrinth of shell corporations and strategic investments. The Anderson deal Marcus had bragged about at the barbecue? We'd orchestrated that entire acquisition, using Marcus's predictable negotiating tactics against him. The 15% stock drop was just phase 1 of our restructuring plan. Claire, I called as she turned to leave, is everything set for the family dinner tonight? Yes, ma'am. Your parents' favorite restaurant, you now own it by the way, is reserved for 7 p.m. The private room has been prepared according to your specifications. I smiled, remembering all the times I'd sat in that same restaurant, listening to Marcus boast about his latest achievements while our parents beamed. Tonight would be different. My desk phone lit up, Richard Sterling's direct line. Sarah, he said when I answered, his usually commanding voice subdued. The board is assembled. Marcus is currently showing them his 5-year growth strategy, completely unaware that he's presenting to his new boss? I finished. Don't worry, Richard. Just follow the plan we discussed. I hung up and turned to the wall of screens displaying real-time data from our various holdings. Elite Solutions had grown from a 3-person operation in my garage to a shadow empire controlling over $50 billion in assets, all while maintaining the appearance of a modest consulting firm that paid the bills, as I told Marcus so many times. The clock struck 9:30 a.m. Showtime. I opened my laptop and connected to Sterling International's boardroom video feed, another system we secretly controlled. Marcus was in full swing, gesturing at his PowerPoint presentation with practiced confidence. And that's why, he was saying, my strategy will increase shareholder value by at least 40% over the next. Richard Sterling stood up, cutting him off mid-sentence. Thank you, Marcus. But before we continue, there's someone else who should be part of this conversation. On cue, I appeared on the massive screen behind Marcus. He turned, confusion crossing his face as he recognized me. Sarah? Why are you? Hello, Marcus, I said calmly. Please continue with your presentation. I'm particularly interested in your plans for the Anderson acquisition. You know, the deal you're so proud of closing for $80 million. He blinked. I don't understand. Why is my sister on the screen? Richard, what's going on? Richard Sterling cleared his throat. Marcus, I'd like you to meet the new majority shareholder of Sterling International. Sarah Miller, CEO of Elite Solutions Group. The blood drained from Marcus's face as Richard continued. Elite Solutions now owns 51% of Sterling International. They also control Anderson Corp, which is why that acquisition you bragged about was possible in the first place. That's impossible, Marcus stammered. Elite Solutions is just a small consulting firm that manages over $50 billion in assets, I finished for him. Though I suppose I should thank you, Marcus. Your constant underestimation made it so much easier to build this right under your nose. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Marcus stumbled backward, knocking over his leather chair as the reality of the situation sank in. The other board members were frantically pulling up Elite Solutions on their phones, their eyes widening as headline after headline confirmed their new reality. This morning's press release should be hitting now, I said, glancing at my watch. Elite Solutions emerges from the shadows, the hidden giant behind corporate America. As if on cue, Marcus's phone started buzzing incessantly, no doubt our parents seeing the news. I watched through the video feed as he struggled to maintain his composure, his perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit suddenly seeming like a costume rather than armor. You've been, all this time. He sputtered. The Anderson deal was a test, I finished. One you failed spectacularly. You were so eager to close the deal, you never questioned why Anderson's board accepted such a low offer. They accepted because I told them to. Richard Sterling, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. Marcus, your sister's firm has been advising us for the past year. Or rather, directing us. That restructuring you've been gossiping about? This is it. The boardroom doors opened and my CFO Jessica Chin walked in. Marcus had hit on her at a corporate event last year, dismissing her as just another MBA trying to play with the big boys. Now she carried the documents that would end his career at Sterling International. Ms. Miller, Jessica nodded at my video presence, then turned to Marcus. Your termination package, Mr. Miller. Given the circumstances, we're being quite generous. Marcus finally found his voice. Termination? You can't. I'm Vice President of Acquisitions. I closed the Anderson deal. You closed a deal that we orchestrated, Jessica corrected. Every step was choreographed. Your negotiating tactics were so predictable we used them against you. Check page 3 of your termination documents. There's a detailed analysis of every mistake you made. My phone buzzed again, mother calling for the 5th time. I let it go to voicemail, focusing instead on Marcus's crumbling facade. The family dinner tonight, he said suddenly, looking up at my screen. You planned this. You were going to humiliate me in front of everyone. Actually, I replied, I was going to offer you a chance at redemption. Elite Solutions is expanding its European operations. We need someone to handle minor acquisitions in our Rotterdam office. Starting salary is significantly less than what you're making now, but... I smiled, echoing his words from countless family gatherings. It would be a start. The irony wasn't lost on the board members, several of whom had witnessed Marcus's condescending treatment of me at corporate events over the years. Rotterdam, he choked. You expect me to move to Rotterdam and work for my little sister? No, Marcus. I expect you to finally learn the lesson I tried to teach you years ago. Never underestimate someone just because they don't broadcast their success. Jessica placed another document on the table. Your flight leaves tomorrow morning if you accept the position. Business class, of course, we're not monsters. Though you might want to check the historical stock performance of the companies you so proudly acquired. Elite Solutions has been shorting them for months. Marcus collapsed into the nearest chair, his carefully crafted world dissolving around him. Through the video feed I could see the exact moment his arrogance finally cracked, revealing the insecurity beneath. The family barbecue, he whispered. When I offered to get you an HR position, you were technically offering me an entry-level job at my own company, I confirmed. One of many ironies you'll probably discover as you review your time at Sterling International. Richard Sterling cleared his throat. The press is gathering in the lobby. They'll want statements about the change in ownership and management. Then let's not keep them waiting, I said. Jessica, please escort Marcus out through the private elevator. No need to parade him past the media. Despite everything, he is still family. As Marcus was led out, still clutching his termination documents, I addressed the remaining board members. Ladies and gentlemen, Elite Solutions has extensive plans for Sterling International. Your cooperation during this transition will be noted and rewarded. Your resistance. I let the sentence hang. My phone buzzed one final time, a text from our father. What have you done? I smiled, thinking of tonight's family dinner and the even bigger revelations to come. Marcus's humbling was just the beginning. Elite Solutions didn't just own his company. We owned the banks that financed our parents' lifestyle, the real estate firm that managed their properties, and the investment fund that controlled their retirement accounts. Claire, I called to my assistant, please make sure the private room at the restaurant is stocked with extra tissues. I have a feeling the family will need them. I arrived at La Maison d'Or at precisely 7 p.m., the restaurant staff snapping to attention as I walked through the door. They'd only learned this morning that their modest, regular customer actually owned not just the restaurant, but the entire hospitality group behind it. The maitre d' led me to our private room where my family was already assembled. The atmosphere was thick with tension and expensive perfume. Mother sat rigid in her chair, her usual social confidence shattered. Father stared into his scotch as if it held answers. Marcus, who had apparently ignored the one-way ticket to Rotterdam, slumped in the corner looking shell-shocked. Sarah, Mother attempted a smile. Darling, won't you sit down? We were just discussing your news. Were you? I settled into the head chair, Father's usual spot. Which part? The fact that Elite Solutions controls over $50 billion in assets, or that your country club is now technically owned by my hospitality division. Father's head snapped up. The club too. Along with the bank holding your mortgages, the firm managing your investment portfolio, and the real estate company that leases your offices. I picked up the wine list, my wine list from my vineyard in Napa. Shall we order? The 2015 Cabernet is excellent. I should know I approved the blend. This is insane, Marcus burst out. You can't. Can't what? I asked mildly. Build a business empire? Acquire controlling interests in major corporations? Or are you still stuck on the fact that your little sister has been your boss for the past 3 months? What happened to you? Mother whispered. You were always so quiet, so unambitious. I laughed softly. Unambitious? Mother, I built Elite Solutions from nothing while you were all busy measuring success by the size of Marcus's office. Do you know what I was doing during all those family events I missed? Building this. Every time you called me a disappointment, I was closing another acquisition. Every time Marcus mocked my tiny consulting firm, I was buying another company. The sommelier appeared with the wine I'd already ordered before their arrival. As he poured, I pulled out my tablet and pulled up a document.
I still remember the day my entire world shattered. It was a crisp autumn evening, and I stood in our living room clutching my art school acceptance letter while my father's face turned an alarming shade of red. Art school. His voice dripped with disgust as he stared at the envelope in my hands. After all we've done to secure your place at Harvard Law? I was 22, fresh out of undergrad with a double major in fine arts and business. A compromise I'd made to appease my parents while pursuing my passion. But now, standing in our meticulously decorated living room that felt more like a courthouse, I knew the real battle was just beginning. Dad, please, I pleaded, trying to keep my voice steady. The Florence Academy of Art, it's one of the most prestigious art schools in the world. They only accept 12 students per year. My mother sat perched on the edge of our leather sofa. Her perfectly manicured hands clasped so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Sophia, she said, using my full name instead of the usual Sophie, we didn't spend a fortune on your education for you to throw it all away on paintings. The way she said paintings, like it was something dirty, something beneath us, made my heart ache. On the walls around us hung expensive artwork my parents had collected over the years, not because they appreciated the artistry, but because each piece was a sound investment. I'm not throwing anything away, I insisted. I can make a living as an artist. I've already sold 3 pieces at the senior showcase. For what? My father interrupted, his voice rising. A few $100s? That wouldn't even cover a week's worth of groceries. He strode to his desk and pulled out a thick envelope, my Harvard Law acceptance letter. He'd been carrying it around for weeks, showing it to everyone who would listen. This, he waved it in front of my face. This is your future. Not some fantasy about becoming an artist. I took a deep breath, gathering every ounce of courage I possessed. I'm going to Florence. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's face went from red to purple, and my mother's sharp intake of breath cut through the room like a knife. If you choose this, my father's voice was dangerously quiet. You choose it without our support. No money, no connections, nothing. Richard, my mother gasped, but he held up his hand. No, Catherine. She needs to understand the consequences of her choices. He turned back to me. You have until tomorrow morning to make your decision. Harvard Law and your family, or this, artistic delusion and nothing else. I didn't need until morning. I choose art. The words left my mouth before I could second guess them. My mother burst into tears, and my father's expression hardened into something I'd never seen before. Then pack your things, he said coldly. You have an hour. After that, you're no longer welcome in this house. That night, I left with 2 suitcases, one filled with clothes, the other with my art supplies. My childhood bedroom, once a sanctuary filled with easels and half-finished canvases, now felt like a museum of abandoned dreams. As I packed, I could hear my mother sobbing downstairs and my father's heavy footsteps pacing the hallway. My younger sister Lily slipped into my room as I was zipping up the last suitcase. Her eyes were red from crying. Where will you go? She whispered. I have some money saved, I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. And Marie said I can stay with her until I figure things out. Marie, my best friend since high school, was the only person who had consistently supported my artistic dreams. She was already in New York, working as a graphic designer and sharing a tiny apartment with 2 other girls. Lily hugged me tightly. They'll come around, she said, but we both knew it was a lie. The Blackwoods never came around. They either got their way, or they cut their losses. As I walked out of my childhood home that night, my father didn't even look up from his newspaper. My mother stood by the stairs, tears streaming down her face, but she made no move to stop me or say goodbye. The heavy wooden door closed behind me with a final thud, and just like that, I was on my own. The next few months were a blur of exhaustion and determination. I moved in with Marie in New York, sleeping on her couch and working 3 jobs while preparing for my move to Florence. During the day, I worked as a barista at an upscale coffee shop. In the evenings, I taught art classes at a community center, and on weekends, I did face painting at children's parties. Every spare moment was spent painting, improving my portfolio, and learning Italian through online courses. My parents' words echoed in my head every time I felt like giving up. You'll be a failure. Artists don't make real money. You're throwing your life away. But instead of breaking me, their doubt fueled me. Each criticism became a brushstroke, each dismissal a new layer of paint. 6 months later, I boarded a plane to Florence with everything I owned packed into 3 suitcases. The money I'd saved barely covered my first semester's tuition, and a tiny room in a shared apartment, but I was doing it. I was actually doing it. Florence was everything I dreamed of and more. The city itself was art. Every building, every street corner, every sunset over the Arno River seemed to whisper centuries of artistic inspiration. At the academy, I threw myself into my studies with a passion that surprised even me. While other students complained of the grueling schedule and demanding professors, I thrived on it. Professor Alessandro Rossi, my primary instructor, became not just a mentor but a champion of my work. He saw something in my paintings that even I hadn't recognized. A raw emotion, a depth of feeling that came from somewhere deep within. Your pain, he told me one day as we studied one of my pieces, it bleeds through the canvas. But so does your strength. This is not just technique, Sophia. This is truth. The truth he spoke of was evident in every piece I created. My first major work at the Academy was a large-scale oil painting titled Disowned. It showed a young woman standing in a darkened doorway, her shadow stretching behind her into a warm, well-lit room she could no longer enter. The critics called it hauntingly beautiful and a masterpiece of modern realism. When it sold for 15,000 euros at the Academy's Winter Showcase, I felt a surge of vindication. It wasn't the millions my father dealt with in his law practice, but it was more than a few $100s. I used the money to secure my next semester's tuition and bought my first proper set of professional oil paints. But it was my series, Echoes of Rejection, that would change everything. Over the course of a year, I created 12 large-scale paintings, each one capturing a moment of personal rejection transformed into something beautiful. The centerpiece was a massive canvas titled The Last Supper of the Disowned, a modern take on Da Vinci's masterpiece, but with empty chairs and abandoned place settings. the family table becoming a symbol of exclusion rather than communion. Professor Rossi was instrumental in getting the series exhibited at a prestigious gallery in Florence. Opening night, I stood in my black dress, purchased secondhand, watching as critics and collectors moved from piece to piece, their whispers growing more excited with each painting. By midnight, 9 of the 12 paintings had sold for prices that made my head spin. The Last Supper alone went for 200,000 euros to a prominent Italian collector. As I stood there, champagne glass shaking in my hand, Professor Rossi approached with a smile. "You see, Sophia, sometimes the very people who try to extinguish our fire only end up fueling it instead." That night, as I sat alone in my small apartment counting the zeros on the check, I thought about calling my parents. Surely now they would understand. Surely this success would prove them wrong. But I didn't call. Instead, I took that money and rented a proper studio, bought the highest quality materials I could find, and threw myself into creating more art. The pain of their rejection had become my greatest asset. I wasn't ready to let go of that yet. Little did I know, my success in Florence was just the beginning. The real test would come 3 years later, when my name would echo through the halls of New York's most prestigious galleries, and the art world would learn just how wrong my parents had been about their daughter's artistic delusion. 3 years after my breakthrough in Florence, I stood in my New York studio, staring at my latest creation, a massive triptych titled Genesis of Abandonment. The piece had taken me 8 months to complete, each panel measuring 6 feet by 4 feet, telling the story of familial rejection through abstract symbolism and haunting realism. I'd returned to New York not because I missed home, but because conquering the American art scene was the ultimate proof of success. Florence had given me the foundation, but New York would give me vindication. My new gallery show was opening in 2 days at the prestigious Morgan Gallery in Chelsea. Victoria Morgan herself had discovered my work during a trip to Italy and practically begged to represent me in New York. The exhibition would feature 20 of my pieces, including the triptych, which was already generating buzz in the art world. "Sophia," Victoria's voice cut through my contemplation as she entered the studio. "The New York Times art critic is here. Are you ready?" I nodded, straightening my paint-stained smock. I'd learned long ago not to dress up for critics. They expected artists to look a certain way, and authenticity sold better than polish. The interview went better than I could have hoped. The critic was particularly moved by Genesis of Abandonment, spending nearly an hour analyzing its layers of meaning. When the article came out the next day, it was everything Victoria had hoped for and more. Rising star Sophia Blackwood brings raw emotion to canvas. The headline read, "Her work speaks to the universal experience of rejection while transforming personal pain into transcendent beauty." The centerpiece of her upcoming exhibition, a triptych valued at $4 million, is already being hailed as a masterpiece of contemporary art. The morning of the opening, Victoria called in a panic. "Sophia, you need to know something. Your parents RSVP'd for tonight." My hand froze on my coffee cup. "What?" "They called the gallery this morning. Apparently, your father's law firm represents one of our major collectors, and they saw the Times article." She paused. Should I have security turn them away? I thought about it for a long moment. "No," I finally said. "Let them come. It's time they saw exactly what their artistic delusion has become." That evening, I stood in the packed gallery, watching as New York's elite art collectors and critics moved through the space. The exhibition was titled Price of Rejection, a deliberate double meaning that hadn't been lost on anyone. I was discussing the techniques used in one of my smaller pieces with a collector when I heard the familiar voice that still haunted my dreams. "Sophia." I turned to find my parents standing there, looking exactly as I remembered, yet somehow smaller. My father wore his best suit, the one reserved for important court cases. My mother was dressed in Chanel, her pearls gleaming under the gallery lights. Behind them stood my sister Lily, who had tears in her eyes. "Mother, father." My voice was steady, professional. "Welcome to my exhibition." My father's eyes darted around the room, taking in the red dots next to most pieces, indicating they were already sold. The prices listed would have been unthinkable to him 5 years ago. "Your work," my mother began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "It's different than what we expected." I raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect? Finger paintings?" Before they could respond, Victoria appeared at my side. "Sophia, darling, the Guggenheim curator would like to discuss acquiring Genesis of Abandonment for their permanent collection. They're offering $4.5 million. I saw my father's jaw drop, and for the first time in my life, he seemed genuinely speechless. "Tell them I'll consider it," I said calmly, "but remind them that the Museum of Modern Art is also interested." Victoria nodded and disappeared into the crowd. My father cleared his throat. "Sophia, perhaps we could talk privately. Your mother and I, we may have been hasty in our judgment." I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw what they couldn't say. They hadn't come because they were proud of me or because they regretted their actions. They'd come because I was now successful enough to be worth acknowledging. "I'm afraid I don't have time for a private conversation," I said coolly. "I have collectors waiting, but feel free to enjoy the exhibition. The piece over there," I pointed to the Last Supper of the Disowned, which I'd brought from Florence, "might particularly interest you. It's about a family that valued status over love. It sold for $2 million last week." My mother's face crumpled. "Sophie, please. We're still your parents." "No," I said firmly. "You gave up that right when you gave me an hour to pack my life away. My art, the very thing you rejected me for, has made me more successful than you ever imagined. But success isn't why you were wrong. You were wrong because you chose your expectations over your daughter's happiness." Lily stepped forward then, pulling something from her purse. It was a crumpled piece of paper, a drawing I'd done of her when we were children. "I kept this," she said softly. "I always believed in you, Sophie." I felt tears prick my eyes but held them back. This was not the moment for emotional reconciliation. "Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood," Victoria had returned. "I hate to interrupt, but the mayor has arrived and specifically requested to meet the artist." I turned to my family. "Thank you for coming. The exhibition runs for 6 weeks if you'd like to return. Though most pieces are already sold, you can still look at them. That's free." As I walked away, I heard my father call out, "Sophia, wait." But I kept walking. 5 years ago, they forced me to choose between my art and my family. They never expected I'd succeed at the former. And now they wanted to pretend the latter hadn't been destroyed by their own actions. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the gallery was quiet, I stood before Genesis of Abandonment. The triptych told my story. The first panel showing the moment of rejection, the second depicting the struggle and pain of building myself back up, and the third revealing the emergence of success and self-acceptance. Victoria joined me, champagne glasses in hand. "Your family left this for you," she said, handing me an envelope along with the champagne. Inside was a check for $50,000, the amount they planned to contribute to my law school education, and a note that read, "We were wrong. We're sorry." I took out my phone and snapped a photo of the check. Then, I carefully tore it into pieces and let them flutter into the gallery's elegant waste basket. "Tell them," I said to Victoria, "that my art is no longer for sale, at any price." The next morning, I started a new painting. This one wasn't about rejection or pain or vindication. It was about freedom. The freedom to choose your own path, to define your own success, to decide who deserves a place in your life. I titled it The Price of Freedom and never put it up for sale. It hangs in my private studio now, a reminder that sometimes the biggest triumph isn't proving others wrong. It's proving yourself right. The art world continues to clamor for my work, with pieces regularly selling for millions. My parents occasionally send messages through Lily, asking to be part of my life again. Maybe someday I'll be ready for that conversation. But for now, I'm content knowing that my artistic delusion turned out to be worth far more than any law degree could have been, not just in dollars, but in the priceless currency of personal truth. After all, success isn't just about proving your critics wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were right all along. The Anderson Technology headquarters loomed over downtown, its gleaming windows reflecting the morning sun. 10 years ago, I was thrown out of this building, my father's words echoing behind me. "Take your $100 and never come back." Now I stood in the lobby, straightening my Armani suit and checking my reflection in the polished marble walls. The security guard didn't recognize me. Why would he? Last time I was here, I was wearing a crumpled shirt and carrying a cardboard box of my belongings. "I'm here for the merger meeting," I told him, presenting my ID. "Oliver Maxwell, CEO of Phoenix Innovations." My father had no idea that the mysterious company he was so desperate to merge with was mine. He didn't know that the signature he needed belonged to the son he disowned a decade ago. But let me start from the beginning. I was born into the Anderson dynasty. My father, Richard Anderson, built Anderson Technology from the ground up, turning it into one of the largest tech manufacturers in the country. From childhood, I was groomed to take over the company alongside my older brother, James. The problem? I saw the future of technology differently than my father did. We need to invest in AI and renewable energy, I argued during one particularly heated board meeting. At 25, I was the youngest executive in the company, a position earned through merit but constantly questioned due to nepotism. Stick to what we know, my father dismissed me with a wave. Computer hardware has served us well for 30 years. James, ever the dutiful son, nodded in agreement. Oliver's just trying to reinvent the wheel again. But I knew I was right. The tech landscape was changing rapidly, and Anderson Technology was falling behind. Our profit margins were shrinking, our market share declining. Yet my father refused to adapt. The final straw came when I discovered something disturbing in our manufacturing process. Our main factory was cutting corners, using substandard materials to save costs. The defect rate was rising, but my father's solution was simple. Bury the complaints. It's just business, he said when I confronted him. The savings outweigh the risks. Until someone gets hurt, I countered. Or until our reputation is destroyed. The argument that followed would change my life forever. My father, red-faced with rage, accused me of betraying the family legacy. James stood by, smirking, as our father systematically stripped me of my responsibilities. If you don't like how we do business, my father spat, then leave. I looked him straight in the eye. Fine. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a $100 bill, and threw it at me. Take your ideals and your $100. See how far they get you in the real world. I picked up the bill, tucked it into my pocket, and walked out. Behind me, I heard James say, "He'll come crawling back within a month." They didn't know that I'd been preparing for this moment. While working at Anderson Tech, I'd been developing my own ideas, filing patents under a different name. I had a plan. I just needed the courage to execute it. That $100 bill became my reminder, my motivation. I framed it and hung it on the wall of my tiny studio apartment, where I spent the next year working 18-hour days. With my savings and a small loan from my mother's sister, the only family member who still spoke to me, I founded Phoenix Innovations. The name was deliberate, rising from the ashes of my old life. The first 2 years were brutal. I lived on ramen noodles, worked out of a garage, and faced rejection after rejection. But I had something Anderson Tech didn't, a vision of the future. I developed an AI-driven energy management system that could reduce a company's power consumption by 40%. It was exactly the kind of innovation my father had dismissed as unnecessary. The breakthrough came when a major tech journal featured our prototype. Suddenly, investors were calling. Within 6 months, we secured our first round of funding, $50 million. I never forgot the lessons learned at Anderson Tech, both good and bad. I built Phoenix Innovations with transparency and innovation at its core. We invested heavily in research and development, treated our employees well, and never compromised on quality. 5 years after being thrown out of my father's office, Phoenix Innovations was valued at $300 million. We had offices in 3 countries and a reputation for being at the cutting edge of AI and renewable energy technology. But I kept my identity secret. In the business world, I was Oliver Maxwell, the mysterious founder of Phoenix Innovations. Few people knew that Maxwell was my mother's maiden name, or that the CEO who was disrupting the tech industry was the same person Richard Anderson had thrown out with just $100. I watched from afar as Anderson Technology struggled. Their outdated business model and quality issues finally caught up with them. Their stock price plummeted, and rumors of impending bankruptcy began to circulate. That's when James made his move. He orchestrated a plan to merge with a more innovative company, one that could bring Anderson Tech into the modern era. After months of searching, he found the perfect candidate, Phoenix Innovations. The irony was almost too perfect. I received the merger proposal on a Tuesday morning. My assistant Sarah, who was one of the few people who knew my real identity, placed it on my desk with a knowing smile. "Your brother's signature is at the bottom," she said. "He's desperate to make this happen." I opened the folder and there it was, a formal request for merger negotiations, promising Anderson Tech's manufacturing capabilities in exchange for Phoenix's innovative technology. The proposed deal was worth $500 million. I sat back in my chair, holding the document that could change everything. A decade ago, I left that building with nothing but $100 bill and a dream. Now they needed my signature to save their company. The merger meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. As I rode the elevator up to the conference room, where I'd once argued with my father about the future of technology, I thought about all the nights I'd worked until dawn, all the sacrifices made, all the doubts overcome. The doors opened and I stepped into a corridor that held so many memories. Through the glass walls of the conference room, I could see them waiting, my father, older now but still imposing, and James anxiously checking his watch. They were expecting to meet Oliver Maxwell, the brilliant CEO of Phoenix Innovations. Instead, they were about to come face to face with the son they'd written off as a failure. I reached for the door handle, my $100 bill burning a hole in my wallet where I kept it as a reminder. It was time to show them exactly what that $100 had bought. I pushed open the conference room door, and a decade of history rushed in with me. The room fell silent as I walked in, my footsteps echoing on the marble floor. My father's eyes widened in shock, while James nearly dropped his tablet. "Oliver?" My father's voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Dad." I placed my briefcase on the polished table. "I believe you were expecting Oliver Maxwell." James shot to his feet. "What are you doing here?" "Security." "I wouldn't," I said calmly, pulling out my business cards. "Oliver Anderson Maxwell, CEO of Phoenix Innovations. I'm exactly who you're here to meet." The blood drained from James's face as understanding dawned. Our father gripped the arms of his chair, his knuckles turning white. "This is impossible," he growled. "Phoenix Innovations is a multi-billion-dollar company." "Yes," I agreed, sitting down at the head of the table. "And you need our technology to save Anderson Tech from bankruptcy." Sarah entered with a team of lawyers, distributing documents with practiced efficiency. I watched my father's eyes scan the papers, his expression shifting from disbelief to something close to fear. "These ownership documents," he said hoarsely. "You really are the founder and majority shareholder of Phoenix Innovations?" "Yes." I pulled out the framed $100 bill from my briefcase and placed it on the table. "Best investment you ever made, Dad." James lunged forward. "You planned this, didn't you? All these years, you've been plotting your revenge." I met his gaze steadily. "No, James, I've been building something you and Dad were too stubborn to see we needed 10 years ago." My father's business mask slipped back into place. "Fine. You've made your point. Name your price." "Price?" I raised an eyebrow. "For the merger. Obviously, you're here to extort us, to humiliate us." I opened my laptop and pulled up a presentation. "Actually, I'm here to save Anderson Technology, if you're willing to listen." Over the next hour, I outlined my vision. Phoenix's AI technology integrated with Anderson's manufacturing capabilities could revolutionize the industry, but it would require changes, major ones. "First," I said, clicking to a new slide, "we need to completely overhaul the manufacturing process. No more cutting corners on materials." My father flinched. "Those cost-saving measures are necessary for..." "They're necessary for nothing," I cut him off. "Phoenix operates with a 2% defect rate compared to Anderson's 15%. We achieve this while maintaining higher profit margins through automated efficiency." James leaned forward, his hostility momentarily forgotten as he studied the numbers. "These production costs, they're impossible." "They're standard for us," I replied, "because we invested in the future instead of clinging to the past." The presentation continued. With each slide, I could see my father's resistance crumbling. The technology he dismissed as unnecessary a decade ago was now his only hope for survival. "There's one more thing," I said, pulling out a final document. "The merger agreement requires a complete restructuring of the board." "You want control," my father said flatly. "I want competence," I corrected him. "Your current board has led this company to the brink of bankruptcy. That ends now." James stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. "This is extortion. You can't just walk in here and take over." "Actually, I can. Your stock price has dropped 60% in the past year. You're facing 3 class action lawsuits over defective products. Without this merger, Anderson Technology will be bankrupt within 6 months. I let that sink in before continuing. But I don't want that. Despite everything, this company was built by our family. I want to save it, but on my terms. My father was quiet for a long moment. And what are your terms? Complete restructuring. You and James step down from operational roles but retain board seats. I bring in my own management team. We implement Phoenix of quality standards and ethical guidelines across all operations. And if we refuse, I close my laptop, then I walk out that door, and you can explain to your shareholders why you let personal pride destroy their investment. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, my father did something I'd never seen before. He laughed. A genuine, almost relieved laugh. You really did it, he said, shaking his head. You proved me wrong. Completely and utterly wrong. That wasn't my goal, I replied quietly. No, he agreed. Your goal was to build something better. And you did. He picked up the merger agreement. Where do I sign? James wasn't so easily convinced. Dad, you can't be serious. He's trying to steal our company. No, son, our father sighed. He's trying to save it, something we should have let him do 10 years ago. The next few months were intense. Merging two major tech companies is never simple. But transforming a corporate culture is even harder. Many of Anderson's old guard resisted the changes, clinging to outdated methods and mindsets. I moved my office back into the Anderson building, though I kept the $100 bill framed on my wall. Every morning, I'd look at it and remember where this journey started. James eventually came around, though it took time. One evening, he came to my office, holding a report about our new AI-driven manufacturing process. The defect rate is down to 3%, he said, dropping the report on my desk. And profits are up 40% this quarter. I know, I replied, not looking up from my computer. He shifted uncomfortably. Listen, Oliver, I was wrong. We were all wrong. What you've built, it's incredible. I finally looked at him. It's not about being right or wrong, James. It's about being willing to change, to adapt, to see beyond what's comfortable. He nodded slowly. Think you could teach me? That was the beginning of a new chapter in our relationship. James proved to be an apt student once he let go of his pride. His experience with traditional manufacturing complemented my innovative approach, and together we started bridging the gap between the old Anderson tech and the new. My father took longer to adjust. He would sit in board meetings, watching as we implemented changes to the company he'd built. Sometimes I'd catch him smiling proudly, other times he'd grip his armrests in barely concealed anxiety. 1 year after the merger, we held a company-wide celebration. Anderson Phoenix Technology, as we were now known, had just been named the most innovative tech company in the country. Our stock price had tripled, and our products were setting new industry standards. During the celebration, my father pulled me aside. He seemed older, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen him. I've been thinking about that $100, he said, gesturing to the framed bill in my office. What about it? I gave it to you as an insult, thinking you'd fail and come crawling back. He shook his head. Instead, you used it as motivation to build something extraordinary. I studied him for a moment. You know, I never wanted to prove you wrong, Dad. I just wanted to prove myself right. He smiled sadly. You did both. He reached into his pocket and pulled out another $100 bill. I don't suppose you'd let me invest this in the company? Better late than never. For the first time in years, I laughed with my father. Sorry, Dad, we're not currently accepting new investors. Now, 5 years after the merger, Anderson Phoenix Technology is a different company. Our AI systems are revolutionizing manufacturing worldwide. Our renewable energy division, once dismissed as a pipe dream, is leading the industry. James runs our traditional manufacturing arm, implementing innovative solutions in ways I never could have managed alone. My father, though retired, still sends me articles about emerging technologies, usually with notes saying, "What do you think about this?" The $100 bill still hangs on my wall, but it's no longer a reminder of rejection. Instead, it's a testament to something more important. Sometimes being kicked out is just life's way of forcing you to build your own door. Every now and then, ambitious young entrepreneurs ask me for advice. They expect to hear about business strategies or investment tips. Instead, I tell them about a $100 bill and a choice. You can let rejection defeat you, or you can let it drive you. The real measure of success isn't in proving others wrong. It's in proving yourself right. And sometimes the longest way around turns out to be the shortest way home. Looking out from my office window at the city skyline, I can see both the Anderson Building and the Phoenix Tower, now connected by a symbolic sky bridge. It's a fitting metaphor for how life works. The bridges we build are often more important than the buildings they connect. That $100, it wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. And sometimes that's all you really need.